Every once in a while, someone asks me some of the basic aspects of being Catholic. My first response isn't all the rules or the stereotypical things that we do, like ashes or fish on Fridays or things like that. They're important, but there's other things that are even more important. Instead, I always start with God. God's love for us in the way that he created us. God's love for us that he sent his only son into this world to suffer and die for us. And the fact that God continues to love us and be actively present in our lives even today. The love that God has for us is both creative and transformative. This love of God gives us our very existence, and it continues to direct, shape, and govern our lives. And I think being able to witness this transformation in the lives of others is perhaps one of the most rewarding things we have on earth. Parents get to see their children transform as they grow up. Teachers get to see their students transform as they develop and learn. Coaches, dorm rectors, all of us are privileged to see how God's love and how God's presence transforms their lives. And Christian transformation finds its source in Jesus' resurrection from the dead. By our baptism, we have put on Christ. We have died with Christ, we have died to the world, we have died to sin, and we rise with him. As our beautiful Easter sequence says, Christ indeed has risen from the dead, and we have life in his name. Throughout our readings today, we see this transformation at work. The disciples are afraid and hiding, unsure of what to do after Jesus' death. Jesus appears to them, greets them, and then sends them out. No longer do they cower, unsure of what to do. They rejoice, and they are sent on mission. Just as Jesus forgives them, they are sent out into the world to be agents of God's love, God's forgiveness, and God's mercy to the world. We see the first fruits of this commissioning in our first reading in the Acts of the Apostles, where the early community of Christians bore witness to the resurrection by being of one mind and heart. They showed great care and concern for one another, and they ensured that each person had what he or she needed. See how the love and mercy of God brought about so many good works of charity and love among the first Christians. We also see the transformative effects of God's love in St. Thomas. For what it's worth, I'm not really a huge fan of the Doubting Thomas moniker. For me, it's Transformed Thomas, and here's why. Transformed Thomas, sure, it has the catchiness of alliteration, it rolls off the tongue nicely, but this is not a gimmick. Thomas's life of faith is not limited to one point in time. It's a continuum, it's dynamic, it grows, and it's affected by the transforming power of God. Thomas doesn't refuse to believe that Jesus has risen. He's open, but he sets some guidelines for the conditions that God must meet in order for him to accept and believe. And I think for us in our current times, this is a temptation as well. We want to be able to see and know everything. We like to have a neatly defined set of rules and formulas that kind of explain how things work and why they happen in a certain way. And this isn't a bad thing, because God made us and made creation understandable so that we could learn about God by observing the natural world. And it's really amazing to see that we can predict things like when the sun, the earth, and the moon are going to be aligned on like a random day in April. Prior to joining Holy Cross, I worked as a software engineer, and I think this still affects the way I see and react to the world and go about solving problems. Because I like to have a nice, neatly defined list of requirements and things like that I need, a good understanding of condition, who is using the software for what. And it's sometimes, I don't really like to have to work on something where I don't quite have everything figured out, because there's nothing more irritating as an engineer to have things like the ground shift under your feet as you're working on something. And perhaps going out on a limb here, you've probably used a piece of software that hasn't quite done what it was supposed to do. It can be extremely limiting for us to try to understand exactly how God works and why God does what he does. God's not a program or an algorithm. Thomas's transformation occurs when he accepts Jesus on Jesus' own terms, rather than on his own terms, on his own requirements that he imposes on God. And when he accepts this criteria, Thomas makes such a profound profession of faith. My Lord and my God. He accepts Jesus' invitation to believe on Jesus' terms, not on his own terms. And look at the fruits of Thomas's ministry. He goes out to the far corners of the world, to the southern peninsula of India, to spread and preach the gospel. This second Sunday of Easter is sometimes called Divine Mercy Sunday, where St. Faustina Kowalska received the message of divine mercy and made these known in her spiritual writings. Jesus, I trust in you, is a common refrain in the various divine mercy devotions. And like St. Thomas, Jesus invites us to believe in him and to be transformed by him by the love and mercy of God. The question is not how we can fit God into our box that we can control and understand, but instead of how we fit into God's box. This allows us to accept the love and mercy of God, which are things that we can never earn, deserve, or merit on our own. That it not only transforms us, it allows us to transform the world by being salt, light, and leaven of divine love in a world that so desperately needs it. Jesus, I trust in you, my Lord and my God.